Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. This is part 3 and the final part in my little series answering your questions for July 2021. I had to refilm this last bit because the video was a bit cruddy when I tried to answer every single one of your questions in one sitting. So if this one looks a bit different to the other two, that's why I had to refilm it. I'm going to jump straight in, pick up with the questions where I left off, and get all the way to the end with this video. See you on the other side of the intro. Okay, as I promised, get straight into it. Spring in Fielta asks the question, with more watch companies going direct to us via websites and their own boutiques, aren't discounts kind of going the way of the dodo? And secondly, can you even ask for a discount on a website, or do you have to go to an AD for one? Okay, I'm not a super expert here, so I'm going to give what I have kind of seen, but also talk a little bit about what I've heard. So, yes, I do think that discounts are going to get harder and harder to get moving forward. Yes, a lot of that is about the watch companies taking greater control of the sell, but I think there's also lots of evidence that watch companies are taking more and more control of their catalog, their inventory, and their distribution. You're seeing things like all of these limited editions that companies like Seiko and Omega are bringing out are all about cutting up the amount of watches that you sell, distributing them more in a more disciplined way, not having dumping going on to the grey market. And so a lot of steps are being taken to control that process and make sure that the price that we pay is closer to MSRP. So I'm not going to say discounts are going to die, but I will say that I believe discounts are going to get harder and harder to get moving forward. Can you ask for a discount on a website? I've never seen a facility to do that. I have heard some people have tried, and I've heard that some people have found some success there. What I've mostly experienced, what I have experienced for myself personally, is when dealing with a company boutique over the internet, the question of a discount there's no even an avenue for that to arise. However, what they did do was throw in a free strap or so. So I think you're going to see more kind of in-kind deals done rather than straight out cash discounts. Robert North asks a simple and direct question. What can we expect from the 2021 Melbourne Cup? I don't like gambling. I'm not into horse racing. So the best I can say, Robert, is I think it will occur. That's about all. And it will be won by a horse being ridden by a person in stripy silk clothes. There you go. That's my prediction. Howard Myers asks a really interesting question about what do I think of these new Citizens with their high-end La Joux manufacture movements. I've got two thoughts on this, and part of this is actually coming out of my more recent sort of research around the issue of solar high-end quartz watches in Citizen. So first things first, I'll start with what I think of it. I don't know what I think of it. I think the watch itself looks very pleasant, looks quite handsome, a little bit bland. It doesn't really reach out to me. And secondly, I'm a little confused about where it fits in with Citizen. It's so different to everything else they're doing. It seems like an absolute shot in the dark that doesn't integrate with anything else within the Citizen group. Now, I say seems because one of the things that I found after I gave my answer on why we didn't seem to see high-end solar movements in Citizens and Seikos, and I got a lot of feedback saying that's not true. There are high-end Citizen watches with solar movements. They're just not sold to us in the West. They're all over in the East. And sure enough, when I knew what to look for and I went to JDM and other Asian websites, you can see a whole world of citizen watches, high end, really complicated, very expensive, that are not even offered to us. And when I start to look at that citizen, then suddenly this $6,000 citizen watch with a Swiss mechanical movement just slots into place and makes sense. So what do I think this is? I think it's a handsome watch that is unlikely to get a lot of traction in the West, but is likely to be incredibly successful in the East, where it fits into the idea of who Citizen is and what the products they have and where they sell much more easily. I think moving back, there could be an opportunity for a wearer in the West to get this and kind of get in on the ground floor. Were Citizen ever to try and do like a Grand Seiko, getting hold of one of those first like key pieces could be kind of cool. And I take your point, there's a real element of under the radar stealth kind of going on with picking that watch up when you live in the English speaking West. Okay, so Yashar doesn't really ask a question, rather almost levels an accusation at me. George does an excellent job of turning that into a question. So the question is, and I'll put it as a question, have I ever considered that the real reason I don't own a Rolex is I try so hard to be different to everyone, and that as a result I might be dudding myself and missing out on Rolex quality? Yes, I do think about that, Yashar. I spend a lot of time looking inwards and looking at myself. And one thing I can say to you absolutely is I don't try hard at all to not be attracted to brands like Rolex. That is my natural inclination. That is how I roll. That's my reflex. And I don't say that as a boast. I'm fully aware that that has a tendency to lead me to self-sabotage. That has a tendency to lead me to buy watches that, or any product, to deliberately avoid the popular and possibly end up with a dud. Because I am aware of that, I investigate that very, very, very closely. I am fully aware of the quality of a Rolex watch. I don't need to artificially run down the quality that Rolex produces in order to justify the reason I don't buy them. They are great watches. I don't believe I've ever said anything else on this channel. However, just because even after I punch through that and I acknowledge them as being great watches, even if I look at individual watches and say that they are ones I like, that is totally different from me reaching into my wallet, slapping a credit card down and wanting to buy that watch. Wanting to own a watch, for me, is all about wanting to own an artifact that reflects either who I have been, am now, or want to be in the future. And despite the qualities and the undeniable qualities of a Rolex watch, I never want the Rolex brand, the Rolex story to reflect me, either my past, present, or future. That is, I don't want their narrative to become part of my narrative. And that's fine. That is great for me. It means nothing for you. It means nothing for your enjoyment of your Rolex watch. Okay, so John asks, if I was to buy a current Omega, what would it be? It would be a Planet Ocean steel or ceramic GMT. Why? Because I love GMT watches. It's a thing I collect. I love the Planet Ocean. The SMP doesn't really do it for me, but the Planet Ocean does. I do also love the 2-dial or racing Speedmaster chronographs. Okay, so why don't I have one? Predominantly, it's not that I'm anti-Omega. I really like them. I think that their watches are brilliant. I wouldn't have the 2-register chronograph, the Speedy Racing one, primarily because it just doesn't fit with my collection. As much as I love it, there's no reason for me to buy it. I collect travel watches. I collect dive watches, sort of dive watches. I collect vintage Alpinas and Seiko divers. So if that's what I collect, there's really no reason for me to buy a Speedy Racing. There could be for me to buy that Planet Ocean GMT. And that is why that watch is on my list to look at, continue to try on, save for, and one day buy. The biggest problem that watch has right now is there's just other watches in front of it on the list. That's really about it. Okay, so Steve Fox has given me a long email. Thank you very much, Steve. I don't mean that to make fun of you. I love longer comments and emails. But very quickly, he's thinking about buying a luxury watch, kind of a watch that stretches him, that will feel like a bit of a splurge. And he's got 3 in mind: the Railmaster, Tudor North Flag, or the Blackbay 41. And then his concern seems to be, are they luxury enough? Are they blingy enough? Are they sort of dressy enough to qualify as a luxury watch? I would say absolutely, Steve. Throw out any bullshit ideas that other people are giving you, that luxury has to be something specific. It has to be super exclusive, or it's got to hurt, or it's got to be hard to get. None of those things are true. Luxury is really anything that makes you feel great. Anything that when you look down at your wrist and you see it, you feel this little surge of, oh, I really stretched, but I treated myself, and this makes me feel brilliant. And those are 3 brilliant watches. I think any one of those would be a fantastic luxury buy. You ask me which I think would be the most robust. Difficult. I'm going on specs. I know no more than anyone else. My gut feel would be the Railmaster, because it comes with the METAS certification that the other 2 don't. My personal preference, you haven't asked this, but I'll go with it. I love the really modern take of the North Flag. I do really enjoy that. I also love the Railmaster. So from a pure aesthetics point of view, I would be torn between the Railmaster, which is a little bit backwards looking, and the North Flag, which is very forwards looking. It would be a really tough one for me. I think I'd go the North Flag on those 2 bets, but that's just me. So Chris Stevenson has asked me a question I have been dying to answer since the time I saw this, which is, at what point do I think value stops being relevant and people are just paying for the name on the dial? Okay, so I'm not being facetious here, Chris. I am absolutely serious when I give you this answer. $15. Once you get past $15, you are now, so basically the price of a cheapest Casio, value stops being important. Because this, and I firmly believe this, there is nothing more toxic, and it's a nice flow on actually from the question previously. There is nothing more toxic. There is nothing that devalues, degrades, despoils the concept of luxury more than trying to ascribe some value to it, to try and say it was value for money or bang for buck. That is the antithesis of luxury. Trying to do a bang for buck calculation of something which is supposed to make you feel joy is a waste of time, in my view. Figure out what you're prepared to pay, be that $200, $2,000, $20,000, $200,000. Pick your budget, buy the best watch you can for that budget. That is how you buy luxury goods. If I'm going to do a bang for buck calculation, do I do those in my life? Yes, I do. I do them for microwave ovens, vacuum cleaners, fridges, basically white goods I don't give a shit about. I don't think that value for money has any place in trying to decide the luxury items whose job it is solely to make me feel great. You ask also, one last little piece is, at what point are we paying for the name on the dial instead of the quality of the watch? Another little hand grenade here. The name on the dial is part of the quality of the watch. In my world, you can't separate the 2. Okay, so Thomas Burnett asks me another long question, which I won't read out, but it's essentially, do I have some favorite materials, and can I kind of make a list of my favorite materials, my favorite movements, etc., put all that together and come up with a perfect watch, a grail? So to answer the first part, Thomas, no, I don't have favorite materials. I mean, if you look at my watch box, it's mostly steel, but that's because steel is the most common sort of material used, and therefore it's going to have the most designs, therefore it's going to have the most watches I like. I've got a fair bit of titanium because the same reason, it's a common material. I've got one bronze watch, but that doesn't mean I don't like bronze. I actually love it as a material. I have found that when people are starting to use a material other than steel or other than steel or titanium, or I should probably say gold as well, designers seem to get overwhelmed by the materiality of their construction, and they lose sight of the design. So for me, the biggest problem I have with a lot of, say, bronze watches or carbon watches is not that I don't like the material. It's that I think the designers get carried away with the material and they forget to design the rest of the watch. And as a result, I don't own a lot of bronze watches and I don't own any carbon watches, not because I don't like the material, but no one's made a great watch from those materials just yet. Or not a watch that's been so great that's within my collecting kind of style and the things I'm looking for that I've gone to spend money on yet. Okay, so if I could put all that together and come up with a grail watch, absolutely not. My grails don't kind of work that way. I've had one grail, I have bought it. Right now I don't have another one. I don't know when or if I'll ever have another grail watch. Okay, so Ramsey asks a question who clearly doesn't know my collection. Tudor, Blackbay or Breitling Super Ocean 42, which would I pick? I've already made my choice, mate. I've got a Breitling Super Ocean 44. Really quickly, why? One, brand is important to me. You might think that's silly. It might not be to you, but it is to me. Tudor is not a brand I really warm to. For me, Tudor, there's a saying when, in old royalty world, every king wanted to have an heir and a spare. There was the heir that you really cared about, and then you had to have a second child, not because you wanted a second child, but just because it's useful for you to do so. For me, Tudor is a spare. It's never really had an existence of its own. It's only kind of makes sense as an adjunct to Rolex, and that's difficult for me to really say, well, that's something I want to connect to and make part of my story. Breitling, on the other hand, love it or loathe it, for me, I love it. It's a history and a story and a narrative which really resonates with me, that I really want to feel and make part of who I am, and so I'm attracted naturally to the Breitling brand. Same thing with the Blackbay versus Super Ocean split. The Blackbay is a very, very good looking watch. It's a very handsome watch. I think the Blackbay is actually a much better modern interpretation of those original Rolex Submariners than the actual Rolex Submariner is right now. So I'm not going to deny it's a beautiful watch. It's just a bit more backwards looking than I would like. Someone asked before about my split between Railmaster and North Flag, and I tend to lean towards the North Flag because it's that more modern, forward-looking watch, and the Super Ocean is the same for me. Whereas the Blackbay line is firmly looking back to the late 60s and late 50s, and where that developed through the 60s. The Super Ocean is very much sort of starting from now and looking forward, which is, for me, a much more attractive proposition. Dara Rowan asks the question, do I ever experience burnout from watches or the collector community? Not from watches. I've never felt the slightest twinge of burnout from watches. I've never woken up in the morning and thought, I don't really want to see any watches today. Just hasn't happened. From the collector community, absolutely. I find I burnt out of the forums within, and admittedly, I was kind of like prepared or pre-prepared to be burnt out from forums, having come from automotive and photography forums, which are insanely toxic. Coming into the watch forums, I found it wasn't that different. So I reckon I was in forums and active in forums for maybe a month, 6 years ago before bailing on those. And then Instagram I kind of enjoy because there's not a lot of talk. You just see a watch. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, you just move on. Facebook I have largely tired of. What I would, because it's just the same topics and the same anonymous, difficult to get along with kind of commentary. So I've really backed away from a lot of that. What I have, though, not burnt out on is being a content creator. So running this channel, doing my own Instagram, that has never felt like a chore. So I still really enjoy that. I've started being more interested too in smaller communities, Discord groups, smaller Facebook groups, where the anonymity kind of goes away and you start to know the people. Even if you don't know them in IRL, you kind of know the handle, you know the person, you have a quasi kind of relationship with them. So yeah, I've definitely burnt out of the big faceless 4,000 person Facebook group, but I'm really enjoying the small couple of dozen person group on Facebook or in Discord groups. So yeah, I've kind of experienced that burnout and I'm probably not going to recover from it. Okay, so the last question was from the Watchdog podcast asking, really some condolences for my dog that passed away recently. Thank you very much. And asking me to tell a story about this, my dog, Agador. Okay, you know what? I won't. I'm going to save that for when I come on your podcast. So you just got to ask me to come on and then ask me that question and we'll do it then. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. This is the last round of my answers to your questions for the middle of 2021. I'll do another one of these in about 3 or 4 months. If you've got more questions, save them up, send them in then. I've been Pete McConville.